Just booted me. All right, it's saying it's live. Do you guys see that? Yes, it
Yes,
is. All right.
sir.
Yeah.
Yay, us.
Good Lord. Okay, so for those of you that are tuning in, this is the Oracle In podcast. My name is Eric. I'm joined by two other, I would say, good friends. I don't know if they would say the same, but we'll keep it civil. Um, Yeah, and we're over here starting up a podcast where we're going to be talking about current events and important issues. And you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, friends. I'm Kevin. Uh, yeah. Hi.
I'm Laquan.
Clearly, we're new at this. So, what we're going to be doing with this podcast is taking a look at all kinds of issues, ranging from political to social to scientific to the arts to whatever seems like it's relevant and pertinent to the time that we live in. So. I guess I'll go ahead and start. My name is Eric, and like I said earlier, and I have been very interested in doing something like this for a long time. The two gentlemen, Kevin and Laquan, I've been friends with for a few years, and it seems like any time that we start getting into conversations about the world, about things that we see, it seems like we always get into some deep dialogue, and we start exploring areas that I think oftentimes gets left out of most conversations that we hear, whether it's through Facebook or other social media outlets. And I thought it would be worth trying to bring something like this together. So my interest in starting something like this up is I really want to see what happens if we can bring, for lack of a better word, an adult approach to really talking about these issues. Yeah, I know. Especially when it comes to something like politics, because that's always challenging when you have politicians who are supposed to be the adults in the room, and that's not exactly what we're observing right now. So that's about my intro for this. You guys want to take a shot of what got you involved, what got you interested?
So, Kevin, I like bumping my gums and making blanket generality statements that I hold to be true until I change my opinion. Interested in politics. It's delicious. It's disaster porn. It's everything that you want and more, because it has to do with your daily life. Get involved with everything from the local to the national. My background's kind of doing a little bit of everything, jack of all trades. Something like this has been, it's an idea we've been kicking around for a while, and it seems like it'll be fun. Once we get a little bit more, we got to feel it out for the first few episodes, kind of see what people are into, go from there, find something that's going to be delicious and entertaining and happy fun time all at once.
Well, I'm Laquan. I'm rounding out the group. So a little bit about my background. Served 8 years in the Marine Corps. Some school under my belt. So I do know a little bit of what I'm talking about. I have my MBA, so I want to pretend like I know a little bit of something. On top of that, I like bumping my gums too as well. Want to bring a realistic approach to politics. Kind of cut through the BS and really get to the core of like what's going on. So I figure it'd be a great opportunity and a great platform to talk trash.
Yeah.
All right, so for our first episode here, Naquan, you and I were talking earlier about what was the issue? Is what happened when you stress out about the internet? It wipes your memory. We were talking about the case of what was his name? David Becker.
Yeah.
Is that his name? The gentleman who was, I believe he was arrested on a rape charge of, sexually assaulted apparently two young women, and I wasn't sure if he was under the age of 18 or if he was 18, but something happened where he went through the criminal justice system, and apparently the judge, rather than sentencing him with a felony on his record and affecting this gentleman obviously for the rest of his life, decided to scale back his sentence to about 6 months of probation, which I can understand if the judge, and this was verbatim where the judge said, I don't want to disrupt this young man's future by going to college with a felony record. And the one thing that I will say about this that caught my attention is that I think what was a little disconcerting about that is, and mind you, and this is, oh God, so many different directions. So the one thing that I will say is that I don't know all of the details about this case, so it's hard to know what happened in the courtroom. It's hard to know all of the testimony that was given. But it does look like David admitted to sexually assaulting at least one of them. So that was apparently the case. So it wasn't like maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. It was pretty clear that it happened. The thing that concerns me about this is if he gets 6 months probation, maybe a year or two down the line, he'll have a fairly normal life and be removed enough away from this incident where the two young women who were sexually assaulted, they are the ones that have a lifetime sentence because now they have to bear that burden for the rest of their lives with this experience. So I'm just curious what you guys think about that too, because I think a case like this opens up a lot of things. One, I do think that there's a rape mentality or a culture that's out there among young men where they don't understand boundaries. They push those boundaries and oftentimes too far. And then also with the criminal justice system, what would be an appropriate sentence for somebody like this who is young, made a really stupid mistake, but what would be appropriate considering the two women that now have to deal with this?
So I've just been looking here at the article, reading it on my handy dandy phone while you were talking. So he has 2 years probation. He does not have to register as a sex offender. And what it says here is one of the teens also told authorities that she had heard that Becker had acted similarly with other girls before. His friends sometimes refer to him as David the Rapist.
David the Rapist.
So this, it looks like this is par for the course for this kid. He's white, deliciously white, and he's gonna get away with nothing on it. Just like who was the other kid that did that? The
Brock Turner.
Yeah, good old Brock.
I spoke on this yesterday. And it was very disconcerting to me because it's not really the fact of, well, it is an important fact that there is a disparity in punishment, if it was a man of color. It's not really about that at this point, you know what I'm saying? Because we that's already a known. We know that had it been a man of color, been different, the punishment. To me, I've been kind of following the case a little bit. His attorney came into the court, and what he told the judge was, We've all done dumb things at 17, 18, and 19. Giving this kid, some jail time would ruin his college experience. Hence, the 2 years of probation. Hence what Kevin was saying. He does not have to register as a sex offender if he completes the terms of his probation. So it's contingent on that. So long as he doesn't violate the terms of his probation, he does not have to register as a sex offender. I mean, dude, if you get caught soliciting prostitutes, you don't have to go through with it. Just get caught soliciting and you have to register as a sex offender. This dude, so from what I've read, there was 2 women. They were unconscious from what the stories out there. The next morning, he texted one of them and said he was sorry. So in court, he admitted to one, and I forgot what happened with the other one. But either way, to your point, I'm not exactly sure what the appropriate punishment should be. But the fact that there's been a disturbing trend of these young males being able to take the dignity forcibly from these women and then get a slap on the hand. The Stanford guy, it was more important that his swimming career, be saved than the woman that he was caught in the act of raping. 2 guys pulled him out of the girl, held him down for the cops to come, and then the judge says right there, so first off, you got 2 witnesses. Then the judge says, I don't want to ruin his life. So let me give you a summer in jail. That's it. And then you have this David kid. This is why women don't come forward. Because one, it's the shame of the scarlet letter that now everybody knows you got raped. Secondly, the guy just got off, and you just say it's okay. it's a bad precedent that's being set, and it's on the news, and I just don't understand because. And my last point is this: if you see some of the, and of course I have to bring race into this for a quick second. When a man of color, does something like this, it's all over the news, all over the news. Big deal. For this, you don't hear nothing about it. You might see it on Facebook if somebody posted or something like that, but outside of that, majority of the society don't really know about this. And that's just unfair to the woman, big time, because it just goes to show that these dudes can just get away with anything.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we live in a, well, at least I'll speak for myself, live in a big old fat bubble. Bunch of people that are like-minded or, in a lot of cases, a little bit more extreme kind of views than I have, but tends to be more to the left. I got a lot of vegan friends, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I hear about pretty much every single one of these because it's getting posted, but that's about it, You put up, hey, my dog pooped outside for the first time today. You're going to get 37 likes and a couple of shares. Something like this gets, a couple of sad faces. It's just white noise at this point.
Do you guys think that there's something about, and this is where anytime that I look at issues, there's always a surface sort of component of that, and Facebook is a really good example of that. We see headlines, maybe if we open up a story, we'll try to read through it as quickly as we can without really having like a deeper context of it. So anytime that I start to think about these issues, I start to think about what are some of the underlying themes that come out of that, and one of them is that I do think there's a disconnect between how values and what those values are exactly, how they're getting passed down to younger generations. It's like if you start to develop a culture where, the theme, or not even the theme, but the tagline is that, boys will be boys, guys will just do what they do, then I wonder, like, if the father of one of those young women beat the living dog shit out of this guy, would he be charged with anything? Can we just say, well, that's guys being guys. Hey, he raped his daughter. The father has, all the right to whip this guy's ass within an inch of his life. So I feel like when precedents like these are set, it sends this rippling effect through not just the community that was local to, but to a regional, national, and if not to some extent international. But it just sets this precedent that this type of culture will be continuing, and that's where. It's a little challenging for me because I support feminism fully. I really think I'm all about empowering not just women but transgender, whomever, that that we have equality and that we really try to develop a world where we recognize the differences within one another, but yet we still equally value one another. But when I look at how something like this interrupts this whole concept of equality, this is where a lot of women get really pissed off, and it's understandable because I don't read or at least know about any cases where a woman has raped a man and somehow got let off the hook where, well, girls will be girls. So it does seem like there's this paradigm that's still pushing through and pervading through society where young men are allowed to act aggressively, to cross boundaries without any real consequence, or there'll be consequences regardless, but any kind of repercussions. So, I guess I can open that up to you guys. What do you guys think? How can we look at changing this culture where, if it's about young guys just being built up and pent up with testosterone and that male energy, and of course they want to express that sexually, what can we do to, address that in a way where we're not demonizing guys before anything has been done, but at the same time trying to make them aware of, hey, you got to respect these boundaries and not take advantage of women and not do, these sorts of things. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it starts at home, right? How does dad treat mom? What are the values instilled when, little Johnny Poopy Pants is a kid and grows up, and, is his dad always, talking about all the girls he nailed back in high school, or is he, like what's that background? Because, the one that, if you have that instilled in you from young child on, right? think about all the things that you had just beaten into you as a child that were, do this, don't do that. If stop raping people, don't rape people. Hey, don't touch her there. Well, like, what do getting just that to the core of respect and, it seems to me like the first person that should be, up in arms about this is the kid's family. He should be, the parents find out that their son raped somebody, he should be getting his ass kicked, metaphorically or actually. I don't really care. But they should, you got to go. It's got to start at the home. A lot of times the parents, oh, not my kid. That's not my child. He would never do that. Well, really? Because, like in the Brock case, two guys pulled him off a girl. He was doing exactly that. There's that responsibility of, and I'm not blaming upbringing, because there's lots of things that can go wrong. But if you really focus, if we're looking to change the system, we really need to just kind of reinvigorate that conversation at home. And our criminal justice system is a joke. I love that if you ever talk to lawyers or whoever, it's the greatest in the world. Shut up. It's wildly mediocre on a good day and completely crazy and borderline just offensive to the thinking person on a bad day. So I guess two parts, right? Whoop his ass at home, instill the values, and then reform the system that allows for a judge to do something like that and just sit there and keep doing it.
Well, let me ask you this, though, because this is where, when we say something like that, like it has to start at home, we don't have control over that. And, maybe this message will get out. Maybe parents who really do have, those younger generations and they're bringing them up might do something. But there's always that line to be crossed because, even if we say that and say the parents have done a fairly good job in the upbringing, but yet the young kid makes a bad mistake regardless, for the rest of everybody, how is it that we try to deal with this?
The kid's nickname is David the Rapist. I'm not talking about random people. I'm talking about, well, I guess the signs were there if you really think about it. You can't go police, nor should you police everyone's house and everyone's child. But what we can do, so think about smoking, for example, right? When I was a kid, everybody smoked. It was, smoke in the cars with your kids, all that kind of stuff. Now, you see it, and when you see it, it's odd. You're like, why would that person do that? Why would they smoke in the car with the kids? Don't they know how bad that is for them? Like, we've kind of created this conscious change in both the adults and the children of an entire generation to where this behavior we thought was bad is now looked at as odd, not as commonplace. And the more of that we can try to, because it's not just about the physical act of rape. It's about, I hear a lot about the rape culture, where this kind of thing is, men are in control and in dominance of women. It's trying to reverse that that entire, cultural, I guess, problem would be the easiest way to say it.
Well, do you think it comes down to when, and Q, I know we've talked about this sometimes, but if you look about the things that like are on social media, a lot of it is distracting. When I go through my friends list and I look at all the pages that I like, when I look in the right-hand column where it like gives my news feed, like actual news, not the posts or whatever, but the actual like headlines. These are headlines that, it's completely irrelevant to my life, and I've said multiple times I don't like this. Like Kim Kardashian, that name pops up automatically. I'm clicking on this and saying I don't care about this. And I just noticed that it's perpetual, that it's just these like mind-numbingly irrelevant headlines that continually come up. So I am wondering, when we talk about these problems, the one thing that I've also asked myself, talking about the political stuff and this election cycle and everything too, what role does media play in general? And when I say media now, it's not just the news, it's the internet, it's whatever avenue can stream consciousness, information, anything like that, how is it that that plays a role in this construct? Because what fascinated me when I went back to college is when I learned how much investment goes into marketing. They spend millions of dollars literally studying ages, 5 to 7, 13 to 18, and then 18 to 25. And they spend so much money because they're literally breaking down the brain and what it pays attention to. So like with babies, they're looking at, does a baby pay attention to a blue box or a yellow circle? And then they just keep, and these are marketing firms, and they just keep building on the psychological construct to where eventually anything that's placed through media has already been tested in a clinic, in a laboratory, to see what actually gets the physical senses to pay attention to it. So when I think about this conditioning and this sort of brainwash culture, there's no one entity that you can blame for it. I mean, it's just a matter of all of us trying to figure it out together. But that's where I'm wondering, if we start to peel back these layers, and with issues like this and this guy doing this horrible act, does it come back down to when we're engaging one another, we're not having meaningful conversations? Like, was there ever a time where that was actually a thing? Maybe before TV, maybe before radio came along, where the only kind of dialogue that you would have is an actual conversation with somebody, and maybe you would see the headlines of a newspaper, but that would be about it. So I just wonder if we're just being bombarded by all this commercialism and all of these things that really distract us from tapping into our own moral selves and understanding, how are we, first of all, if you were to ask people, what are your values, people, I think, would be stuck for a minute on that, like, wait, let me think about that. Where for somebody that maybe is a little bit more introspective would be like, oh, I think about that all the time, these are my values all the way up. So that's where, again, what really got my attention about wanting to work with you guys on this podcast is that I really want to explore that area, because I think that's at the heart of a lot of these problems that are going on throughout society. We're not connecting with one another in a meaningful way anymore. We do it where we'll talk about topics that really have no relevance to our life, no importance. It doesn't enhance our lives in any way. It just simply sort of keeps the rhythm going of, I got to work Monday through Friday, I got to make it through the weekend, and there's no disassociation from that routine to where you can actually tap in with yourself. The last point that I'll just say on that is, when I learned that there was a difference was when I went back to school and I was actually able to work and support myself, that I could take the summer off, because in education that's very common. And that process was a huge shift for me, because when you can take 2 months off and not worry about work, there's just a different way that you relate to the hours of the day, the positioning of the sun, the lighting of the shadows. Like, you see the world differently. There's different colors that come out. And I just wonder if we're getting into this drone state where we need to think about how we're structuring businesses. We need to think about how we're structuring, infrastructure and all that, so that way we can match more of a fulfilled life while still building towards folks contributing to this sort of community concept.
I'm going to let Laquan talk. You've been bumping your gums for too damn long now.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of put my little 2 cents in on the, when you was talking about the rape culture and just kind of things we can do differently. For me, from my viewpoint, I look back to how we have historically, treated women, or how women have historically been viewed and treated, from the beginning. They've had to fight for everything, legislation to kind of be where they are, right? And they've always, in a sense, from my viewpoint, been looked at as subservient to a certain extent, right? And there's the women's empowerment, there's feminism to kind of get that back. So I say that to say this is that, yeah, the media and just the mindsets have been carved to a certain extent to be this way. Like, this isn't nothing new, right? I know it's kind of like a spike now, but this has kind of always been there. It's kind of starting to break through the surface a little bit more, like with these stories. I mean, it was maybe a little over 10 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that if you raped your wife, it was actually considered rape. Up until 10 years ago, it wasn't even considered rape. You can forcibly take, intercourse from your wife, and it wasn't considered rape up until about 10 years ago. You know, maybe a little bit more than that. Supreme Court ruled on that. You know, so and then again, you talk about Kim Kardashian. You know, you talk about stuff. There's an over sexualization of women, and there's all these young guys out there that cannot control their urges. I mean, it's kind of hard when you see women with assets like that, you know, and you can't get it, you know, so you start to take it, you know, because that's just what you feel like you have to do. And then you start seeing
Well,
people. Go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
And so you start to see that, and it does start to become a trend, you know. There's been a lot. You know, you look at Brock, you know, you look at David. I mean, I have a whole list of people that, you know, that I can read off right now, you know, that has raped and got probation, supervised probation, you know, but nothing, no hard time, you know. And again, you know, I feel like this is kind of how it's always been. So like there has to be a big transformation from the top down, you know, like from the way the news reports it to the way marketing firms market, you know, women and the suggestive photos and videos that they put out there. I just feel like it's just a lot more than just, you know, simple measures to change things.
Do you guys think, and Kevin, I want to ask this out to you too. Do you think this is a matter of where one of the conversations that I have with women that I always feel is interesting space to get into is to try to understand how a woman thinks and how they understand how we think. And especially when it comes to sex, the one thing that I've kind of come around to is that it seems interesting that, you know, more on average, and I'm making a generalization, but a woman hits her sexual peak about once a month when she's ovulating. It's when it just peaks up. Not to say that they're not sexual the rest of the time, it's just there's a certain peak that it reaches. And I've tried to communicate to a lot of, you know, of my female friends that, you know, try to imagine how that feels, and that's basically what a guy goes through every single day. So when you're commuting...
that's kind of bullshit, though. I mean...
You think?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the idea that you can't control your urge, or that, you know, somehow okay, the idea that you're in peak sexual frustration on a daily basis is exaggerating. I mean, there's things you can do to take care of your urges and satisfy the need that have nothing to do with women around. So.
Well, no, but you're speaking to my point, though, because whether a woman's involved or not, I'm not even talking about that yet. I'm just saying that drive is day to day.
Yeah, but I would disagree. I think the libido is subjective. You know, it goes to each person has their own levels, their own, you know, their own standard for what they think is normal. You know, some people might be like, you know, super high on testosterone and yeah, I just want to get it all the time. Other people might not be, and, you know, hey, you know, once every 2 months, I don't care. It's, you know, gets annoying at that point, but right, you know, most days I'm good. You know, so I don't think that's the conversation that, you know, is really productive, or that's not the point that's productive to this conversation. It's, you know, that's almost like an excuse, right?
Oh no, well, I'm not saying it's an excuse, but I can tell you the culture that I grew up in, yeah, which was basically alpha males. That's the mentality. It's every day. It's a major part of your life because that energy is very present. So
yeah, but it's not. It's also not universal, is what I'm saying.
No, not universal.
It's very. I mean, huge gradient there.
I don't know if it's that huge necessarily, because I think it comes out in other ways where maybe it's not quite so direct. But in the context of this conversation, when we're looking at guys who are obviously crossing boundaries, I definitely think that's a part of it, you know. And it's like if you were to look at like the amount of pornography that young males watch, I mean, that sexual activity is very, very rapid. And I'm not saying that, you know, women only hit that. Only hit it once a month. I'm just saying that there's like a peak, and I think that because of the biology that's involved in that, and that's where I'm coming from with this, is that with guys we're always manufacturing sperm and essentially releasing it and constantly going through this biological factor all the time, where women are going through it about once a month unless they're taking birth control. So it makes me just wonder if that if the biology that's involved in this does play a role in how it manifests within actual behavior. And that's where I'm wondering with the whole rape culture, if it's just they're not learning what to do with that energy, and because it feels so strong to them.
Well, if you look at most, well, I'm generalizing with the word most. If you look at a lot of animals, rape is how they have sex, right? It's the male takes whichever one is around. A lot of times there's courting rituals, and there's, what we could construe as consent in the animal kingdom, but a lot of it is just, animal behavior. The difference is, and this is, goes to a much deeper conversation that we don't have time for tonight, I imagine, but, the separation of humans from the animals is, in some ways, what you're suggesting is that it's almost superficial because we still have those same drives and urges. The question really is, at what point do we cross an ethical boundary, and is that even an ethical boundary, given that biologically it's not necessarily, but psychologically and culturally it's a huge problem. So there's a whole deep argument to be had, but I think given that we are psychological creatures and cultural beings, we can't just focus on the lizard brain part of us that's trying to hump everything. We have to focus on the relation between human species, whatever we're talking about, and that's where the problem really lies. Is we spend a lot of time with the lizard brain and kind of give into it, and we don't spend a lot of time trying to understand people, feelings, emotions, and all of that. So whether or not there is a biological urge to procreate on a regular basis is almost secondary to the rest of it, which is how you relate to other people.
True. Yeah, I mean, I wonder that too, though, where like, is there just I don't know. I remember when I was younger, and I remember like the inside of me would always giggle a little bit when I would have like an older adult or an elder like say something like off to the side that, would just crack me up. Just, be like, Eric, I know, you're probably, shunning one off every day, but, you should probably think about this. And it was just that kind of joking around from elders, recognizing that sexuality. It kind of opened me up a little bit in the sense that it allowed me to connect with another male in a way to say, like, this is normal. It's okay to feel this, that this is typical among men. And that conversation those conversations, I should say, that I had always led into, Eric, think about, who the person is, think about who you're getting involved with, you always want to treat them with respect. So I just wonder if those are the conversations that are missing, to where, instead of maybe addressing sexuality and just accepting that it's a part of life and having open discussions about it, if by trying to suppress it or by trying not to go there, thinking that, everything will be fine, if it winds up just creating sort of this isolated, construct of sexuality where it's on such a selfish and egocentric level that there's no recognition of boundaries, because you've already constructed that I'm attracted to this, and that's about as far as it goes. So,
well, we had this, really unhealthy Puritan value system that started a long time ago, where sex is dirty, it should only be used to make babies, preferably man-child, and put a sheet between you when you do it. We're still trying to come out of that, and having the conversation about sex, healthy or otherwise, is missing in almost every home, and with every individual that I know. I don't know anyone that comes from like, oh yeah, no, my parents laid it down perfectly every time. There's always the crazy uncle that's like, yeah, dude, you fucking that chick yet? And you're like, uncle, what? What? I'm 12. Of course not. So I mean, we have a long way to go before we can actually change things, but we still have to, we got to figure out where to start.
I think it starts with acknowledgement. Like we have to actually acknowledge with anything we have to acknowledge that it is a problem. You know, I mean, I think both of you have made some great points, and I totally agree. But I think it really starts with acknowledgement. Like we have to acknowledge this is a problem. You know, like there has to be education. You know, and a lot of it too is what you're exposed to. You know, I always do a lot of research and I always write things down because I never know when I'm going to use them or whatever. But I actually have some things in my notes that I wanted to bring up. So this is Dr. Michael Rich, and director of the U.S. Center of Media and Child Health of Boston, Massachusetts. And there's a study that says there is a connection between violent sexual behavior. The connection between violent sexual behavior is being exposed to violent pornographic images and violent behavior. They're linked, you know. So, you know, that's another thing too, is what you're exposed to. So we talked about, you know, I think Kevin was talking about, you know, porn watching and everything else like that. You know, like the things you're exposed to. You know, any type of violent sexual image you're seeing, it's not always about like a punch or it's aggressive sexual positions. You know, just the different type of role plays you see in porn. You know, people want to act that stuff out. You know, and you know, with no education and really no guidance, sometimes you know people can go out there and do it. They can't control themselves. You know, and so to Kevin's point, I know you was disputing that earlier, saying that, you know, like, but you can't, sometimes when you're that young, that impulse is so strong, sometimes you don't know how to control it. You know, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's been plenty of times that, you know, when we all was younger, you know, you get that impulse when you're so young, and you're just like, man, I don't know what to do with it. But some people don't know how to be rational and be like, look, I can't go out there and just take that. You know, some of these cases that we're seeing right now, you know, they feel like they're the dominant being at that point. They just take it. You have to at some point feel like you're just a dominant being to take it from a woman. You know, like you have to feel like you're just the alpha of her, you know, that you can just take it as yours for the taking. You know, so, but anyway, to my point, I feel like acknowledgement is where it starts. Like as a country, we have to acknowledge that this is a problem, and that's not okay. I mean, we come from a woman, but we're taking it from a woman too. It just baffles me. I never understood how women could be treated the way they are when we come from one. It just doesn't make any sense to me. You know, people have sisters, aunts.
I've always wondered that as like a catch-22 though, because would pornography have that effect where it ultimately misshapes sexuality, or is it a way for, say, an individual to have a private moment in the privacy of their own home to not engage that and just handle it on their own without having to step outside of that and actually bring somebody else into that? So I always feel there's kind of a catch-22 there, because I can see it going both ways. And, you know, that also gets then into censorship. You know, is that something that we want to try to censor, or just try to have more meaningful dialogue and talk about, you know, what sexuality is and really try to just embrace it, and then try to, because for me, I think what I've learned through my own sexuality is that, you know, of course there's a physical attraction, but what really turns me on is more holistically. You know, I need a woman that can stimulate my mind, a woman who can stimulate my imagination, stimulate my emotional body, and that's where my physical body feels like it's at its peak. So I wonder, you know, is that part of what's missing in the communication of, say, sexual education, where maybe, Kevin, to your point, if it's just focusing on the lizard brain of, you know, hey, this is a penis, this is a vagina, this is what happens, or in homosexual activity, I don't want to, you know, discredit that at all, I'm just saying in general. But I'm wondering, is it that if we're focusing too much on the biology of that, you know, it winds up creating miscommunication about what else can be connected to sexual behavior?
Well, so I had a computer that was hooked up to the internet in the mid-90s, and I can tell you that porn's always been there. The abundance is what has increased. You know, it used to be you would spend literally an hour sitting there watching line by line as the boobs revealed themselves as the picture downloaded. So what we have with the internet is the ability to take what might be otherwise a fringe sexual, you know, a fringe sexual act, something where you got something that's like, on the extreme example, there was like that 2 girls 1 cup thing that was
Oh my God.
Everyone watched that. Everyone I know was like, "Oh, you see that was terrible." I'm like, "You knew what it was, and you still watched it." Like,
I didn't watch it. The second I saw what was being squatted over, I'm like, I'm over it. I can't do it.
yeah. But what we have now is, with the internet, with the World Wide Web, we can take something like that would otherwise no one would ever see it, and we can share it to the world. It goes everywhere. So we have a certain level of kink and sexuality that is starting to make its way through through the porn industry, but it's what are people consuming? If you look, Pornhub as an example keeps analytics on a lot of this stuff, and they can tell you like, during this time more people watch porn, during this time less people watch porn. So it'd be interesting to actually dive into those analytics and see, how much do they break it down? Is there an aggressive filter or an aggressive genre that they've kind of sectioned out, and is that on the uptick? Is it on the down? Look at some of the actual numbers from the people that are actually looking at it and see, hey, because I know they have couples friendly and female friendly, and they have these little genres of things. Are those more popular, less popular than a simulated rape, or I don't even know what the terms that they use are, but the more aggressive, because that would let you know people are actually interested in watching this or they're not. But I still think it gets down to so okay. The 19th Amendment is what gave women the right to vote, right? I just heard that the other day because Trump was talking about Hillary Clinton and his, maybe the Second Amendment people can do something about that, and someone on Twitter who was much funnier and smarter than I am said maybe the 19th Amendment people can do something about Trump, meaning women will just vote him out. And what instantly struck me is 19th Amendment. There was 18 things more important than letting women vote. Like that's structurally how this country is built. So you factor in all of, I'm not going to paint all of religion with a broad brush, but let's say most religion has patriarchal kind of leanings, to put it as nicely as possible. Yeah. You take man is dominant, woman is subservient in all the major religious books, and you couple that with, at least in the U.S., a systemic structuring of women are 19th after, men can say what they want, men can have guns, you start working your way down. And finally you're like, oh, all right, I guess the chicks can vote because my wife's not sleeping with me anymore. Like, just that systemic setup is, it's no wonder that we are where we are. I'm just happy to see that people are actually starting to shine a spotlight on it, at least a little bit, to say, hey, guys, this is bullshit.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad you brought that up because, to my point what I was saying earlier, just how we have historically, treated women. Like, they've had to fight and have legislation pushed for everything that they had. Nothing was ever really given to them, so, Matrimonial Causes Act, women's suffrage, the women's lib, all that, even like you said, like the 19th Amendment, like there's always been things that have been priority over them, so that's why I said it's just way bigger. The system has to change to a certain extent, which it's not, but that would have to change because it's always been this way. I just think there's peaks and valleys of when things like this kind of break through the crust, and we kind of see it a little bit more. You see Brock, you see is it David or whatever, David. You start seeing that, but then like now the way the media is portraying it now, people are starting to become alarmed. Like I look at it, and I've always known this, but I look at it, I'm like, wow, like the judge actually said, I don't want to ruin your life. Screw the girl. I don't want to ruin your life because what you have going on is more important than what you took from her. So it's just, to me, it just blows my mind that we have sworn judges that, and even I can't really get on his attorney because he had to do what he had to do, and I understand. You got to win the case, you got to say what you can. But it's just I look at him like, wow, where's your moral compass in all this? You know?
Yeah, I don't forgive attorneys as easily as you do, because I understand their job is to get their client off, but if you help a rapist walk free and they rape again, that's on you as an attorney. You put the safety of everyone else aside to let them walk. Now they can't always know. Yes, he did rape. No, he didn't rape. But a lot. I mean, you look at the serial people that are in and out of court on something, and their attorneys keep getting them off. At what point do we look at the attorneys and say, "Really, dude? That's on you. You're the one that keeps getting. You find some loophole or technicality and let this dude get out there, and 3 days later he's out there, doing his thing."
But there's no
Well, even
morality
more,
in that, though. You're acting in accordance of the law, right? So if you're doing everything in accordance to the law as your attorney to get them off, then you kind of have to throw morality out, because it's like, look, according to the law, this, and that. So you cannot convict my client, So then he walks, So some.
but at the
Go ahead.
at the end of the day, though, would it not be on the jury and the judge? They're the ones who have to assess the values. They're the ones who have to assess the morality of the case, and that's who I would hold responsible, because the judge is the one that ultimately decided. And I actually cannot believe it's like, okay, even if that's the direction that you want to go in, the fact that he would use that kind of language, because I don't know what that would communicate. Now, granted, I didn't read the full transcript. Maybe somewhere in there the judge did address the women, but I cannot imagine, as the father or anyone really that's a friend or family member of those young women, would listen to him say that particularly. And I think that's why it made the headlines, because that's attention grabbing. The fact that, and Q, like you were just saying, the fact that you would, like, you're representing a system that your judgment now just spoke for that entire system, and the young man admitted to raping at least one of them. Apparently the second one was disputed, but regardless of if it was one or both, he came forward and said he did it. So there's definitely guilt there, and I just find it amazing that we live in a world, in a society where these sorts of cultures, these sorts of mindsets are still allowed to flourish. I mean, even 2 years probation, that's enough time for him to, and from what I understand, apparently he has to go through some psychological evaluations. I don't know exactly how that's going to prove or disprove anything, but like you guys are saying, if he goes out and if he and that's another thing too, he's going to college. I don't see this simmering down. I see this amping up. So I'm kind of shocked.
The one point I do want to make about juries is the average American reads at a 7th to 8th grade level. So asking a jury to understand these, you can blame, I can blame the juries a bit, but I also blame the system for allowing 7th and 8th grade reading people to have to interpret this huge case law that is written by people with, the judicial doctorates. They're doctors of law, and they're creating a system of words, phrases, and things, and then you're asking random people, hey, I know this is a complex thing that you have no idea the words I'm saying, but what do you think? And we let that just happen. So if it's, when it's a judge trial, it's just the judge and the prosecutor defender, that's the system, right? When you bring in people, it muddies the waters a bit, at least as I see it, because most people I know, when you start asking them about some of these concepts, or they're lost. No one ever takes the time to learn lawyer speak, because all they do is, the only legal jargon they ever see is on their employment agreement and the contract when they buy a new car.
Right.
I agree. I got a
Man.
question for you, Eric. So, like, you're really shocked that these things still happen like the way they are? Like, legitimately,
So,
like, you're really shocked based off the history of this country? Like, you're...
yeah, so here's what I am shocked about, and I get where you're going with that. But here's the thing that I find shocking. So within a lot of my studies, and this goes back before I went back to college, I got very involved with integral theory and human development and all the different facets that are involved with how we literally start from a zygote and make our way all the way up to these sophisticated animals. Um, and what's very interesting to me about that is that if you have somebody like a judge who, I don't know how old he was, I'm assuming anywhere from what, 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe something like that. So here's somebody that's spent a considerable amount of time on this planet as a human being. Here's somebody that's been exposed to different situations, especially within a court of law. The thing that I find shocking is to have some developmental stunt that he cannot connect to a bigger picture of even his own words and what that would represent and what that would mean, especially based on his position. That's what I find a little shocking, because the more that I see those type of limitations, the more I see that's the actual work that needs to be done within humanity. Is that, we always want to simplify things and say, okay, the judge is bad. Well, maybe the judge isn't bad, but this particular line of development stopped at some point where if he could just take that up a few more notches to become a little bit more encompassing and understand, the complexities involved with all of that, I think he would have used different language. Even if by the law, the young man, maybe that's just what his sentence would have been because the letter of the law defines it like that. It was in Ohio, and I know they have a different set of laws in, say, something like California or Arizona. So that's the part that I find a little bit shocking and disturbing, quite frankly, because we would love to simplify things and just blame one person, but it gets more complicated because maybe in other aspects of that person's life they actually do very well and they are more loving and more encompassing, but for whatever reason, how do we pinpoint those specific areas to help that person develop better? It's like I'm going to have weaknesses, you guys are going to have weaknesses, but we're also going to have strengths. So how can we identify and recognize that in one another to see, like, okay, I got my friend over here, this guy loves to hit on women, he loves to kind of treat them like objects, and maybe I'm more of the, like, say, as a point of comparison, maybe I'm better at morality than, say, a friend of mine would be. But that doesn't mean that, like, if I'm more of the serious type, that his humor wouldn't be more valued because it can help to lighten a mood that maybe perhaps I'm making too heavy. So that's what I mean by strengths and weaknesses. But that's where I wonder, are there enough moral voices out there that are speaking up, holding people accountable, but doing it in a way where people don't feel judged and shut down and defensive, but more open to, okay, yeah, I can kind of see that. Yeah, I really wouldn't want somebody doing that to me, so why would I do that to somebody else? So I kind of see these deeper problems, but to me it becomes simplified if we can just look at the root of the problem as opposed to what's on the surface.
Hmm.
And I know
Yeah,
I get deep with that.
yeah, man, super. Yeah, I mean, as I think we're gonna see as we move things forward with this, we're gonna run into the problem is somewhere in the system, somewhere in the system there is a flaw. And in this case, and a lot of stuff I'm sure we'll be talking about, there's not just one flaw, there's many flaws that create, it's not the judge, it's not the kid, it's not his parents, it's a combination of a little bit of everything that works its way together, and then you see, bullshit happening. So to me, it's always interesting to look at things systemically and say, okay, how do we fix the system? And what I'm seeing constantly, and what we'll continue to see, I think, is it's not easy. There's a lot of components to the way that, even in a city, town, state, country, whatever, the way that individuals relate to each other, to their environment, there's a huge layers and layers and layers of systemic rules, orders, laws, spoken, unspoken, that we're going to have to navigate to even have a chance at trying to make headway. I think, at least for me, the goal to kind of approach something like this podcast and have these conversations is, if we ever do have people sitting there listening to us bump our gums and talk stories, that maybe they take that look at one piece of the puzzle and can help fix that in their little corner, and then maybe next one does that next one. And worst case scenario, maybe we all walk away from this saying, you know what, I think I can do something about this in this one little way, in this one piece. I think I can actually make a difference towards moving things forward. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. It's going to take small steps. Um, I think I'll raise my hand, and I'm the pessimist, I guess, on the panel. I don't, I think the system is the way it is. Again, I'm always going to harp that this is always going on. It will continue. I think it's messed up at the highest degree. I'm hopeful that we can change things. But just the way things are going and have, it just kind of lets me know it's such a huge road ahead, and it's so
Well,
unfortunate.
but that's where, and I'm glad to get your guys' take on this, because that's where I think things get interesting. It is big. It is really complicated. We oftentimes oversimplify things, and I think just to connect with another human being, like, you have to start simple because you have to start somewhere. And that's where I'm wondering if we can just peel back the layers enough and really get deeper into what's the root of all of this. And Kevin, like you were saying, I think that was a really brilliant way to put that. If we dig in and we find, what are our own shortcomings, I think it can help us to identify that of others, and then we can be like, okay, so if I know that I'm strong in this one area and I think that I can add to this piece here, then that's something that maybe I should push forward and do. Because the thing that I think is interesting about this is that, and I can talk about this in other terms later, but say we look at like an individual, a family group, a local level, a state level, and then a national, international, universal level. These are more and more levels that we are recognizing that we live within. And what I think is very challenging is that we have societies set up in a way that it's very hard to acknowledge all of those within the same moment. And we live in a world that requires us to. And maybe that's just a limitation of being a human being, or maybe it's not. And that's where I think my optimism comes from, because I think we are capable of becoming more conscious, more aware of what is going on in the world, and then in particular what our position is in that world, and then what value our perspective has when we live in a social world. So that's where, when we're talking about these cases, and we're going to be obviously talking about some more, I'm curious to see how do we tap into these deeper levels of ourselves and others that maybe we can actually get to the root of a problem and actually start to make an actual change. You guys think I'm flying high, or do you think this is something that we could do?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm the eternal optimist, even when I'm pessimistic. I always see it. There's always a way to fix it. It's just not easy. And when you look at some of these big problems, this is, what gives me hope is you have authors that write books, and they die with their book never being, not even a hit, but maybe not even published. And it's only after their death that they impact the world in a huge way.
Like Van Gogh.
If we can get a few people just, tweaking the system, tiny little things, maybe that's enough that over the next 50, 100, 200 years, we'll start to see things start working themselves out. It's not overnight. We're not going to solve any of these world's problems overnight. But maybe in the course of a generation or two generations, we'll start to really see a massive shift with the way people address each other, address themselves, to where a lot of these problems will either work themselves out, or we'll just find out, hey, man, it's rooted in biology, so unless you want to do, GMO people, there's not a whole lot we can do on this.
Q, what are your thoughts?
Mm. I don't know. I mean, to me, again, I just kind of echo my same sentiments. You know, Kevin, I'm with you. I am an optimist too at the core. You know, am I just kind of pessimistic to kind of how I see things? Yeah, I am. I am hopeful. I am hopeful. You know, but it's just a lot's going on, man. You know, it kind of wears you down. You know, so it doesn't. It's not like I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, or there could be one. I'm just gonna hold out and see it for a little bit.
You know, maybe I can give an example of this because I was actually having a conversation earlier today. So I was actually talking with somebody, a young woman in the millennial generation, and we were originally friends on Facebook, and then I noticed kind of out of nowhere she deleted me, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Like I thought we were cool. Like why would that happen? And very nonchalantly, I bumped into her and I just said, hey, I was just, kind of curious. Was there something that I posted that offended you, or like, was it something I said? And she said, yeah, I can't take all the Black Lives Matter movement. It's like it's too much for me. And I was having a conversation with her today, talking about it a little bit more, and I was asking her, like, I'm trying to get a sense of why would my supporting that bother you to the extent that you would feel that you would have to distance yourself like that? Because when we were talking, she said, I don't, like, there's no beef between us, like, we're cool. So I was like, all right. So when we started peeling back those layers, what I think is, and this is also what kind of gives me some hope too, what I've seen from millennials is that a lot of them, and again, this comes down to the construct and how we start to build our world, they're born into a world where blacks have the right to vote. They've had it at least longer than they've been alive. So it seems like it's been a while, a long time. Women have had the right to vote. It seems like the system is working because these, marginalized folks are allowed to do these things. So they grow up in this world where they're thinking, yeah, everybody's equal. That's common sense. Without much of a historical context, without maybe a relational context. So when we try to bring these sorts of issues, say to somebody like my friend, what I'm learning to do is that I need to be more sensitive with how I use the terms like white privilege. I'm not saying white privilege doesn't exist. I absolutely think it does exist. But I think before we start demonizing people, especially people that are naive, not ignorant, if they were aware of it and they purposefully, ignored it, I can understand that. But people that are just genuinely naive because they don't have that context, they don't have that background or those experiences that can help to connect to, oh, now I see what that message is trying to say. Okay, I wasn't thinking that. I was just thinking that people were trying to divide others, and I'm seeing a bunch of angry people that are on the news. So, okay, I get that. So that's where I'm wondering if we're trying to talk about some of these other things, if we need to approach dialogue in a way that can, and I was saying this on Facebook before, to be inviting as opposed to trying to force, because it's like anything, like, if somebody tries to convert you to their particular religion, nobody likes to be forced. But if you invite somebody in, I'll check it out, I'll see. So I'm wondering if that same approach might have that effect, that we can, take this hope and optimism that we're feeling and then just let it ease up the aggression and the anger, not saying it's not justified, but the natural reaction that people are going to have to that kind of message is defensive, especially if we're trying to communicate what these larger issues are.
Well, I think that's good food for thought, and honestly, I think that's a good place to leave it for tonight. Is we've talked about quite a bit of stuff, and it seems like we can talk about this for hours, but we're get a little reflection on how do we communicate this to people? How do people communicate this to us? How do we do it to each other? So, honestly, I think it's a good spot to leave it and go into our little Zen caves of doom and meditate on it. If that's, I don't know what you do, Eric. I imagine you meditate on things.
In my Zen cave of doom, particularly.
Yeah. I usually just grab a couple of beers or something and have an argument with my wall about it. So, yeah, for me, I think that's good. I think we covered a lot of ground, and we're in a good spot.
Yeah,
Q, you got any final comments?
No, I do think we covered a lot of ground here. Um, I look forward to the future episodes, and things that we're going to be discussing. But yeah, it's a good time for reflection. I don't necessarily have a Zen cave of doom. My wall definitely is undefeated against me right now. So, but tonight will be another night. So I think tonight I got it. So
Yeah. Well, so I guess the last thing that I'll leave off on is that the name of this podcast is The Oracle Inn, and for me, I like to come back to the origin of words, and the word oracle actually comes from a Latin derivative meaning to speak, and an inn being housing or shelter that people can come to is what this podcast is all about, just having people who can speak their mind, talk about important issues, coming together, and then having deeper conversations about meaningful topics. So with that, for everybody that's been watching, I want to say thank you. This was our first episode. We had internet issues before we began, so I was definitely a little flustered, and I feel like maybe 20 minutes ago I was actually able to kind of start getting into my stride. But I definitely look forward to future conversations with you guys and others, and then starting to build a base to see if we can start to maybe have some meaningful change in this world. So I want to thank you guys for joining me, and to everybody else, have a good night.
deuces.